Welcome to The Explainer. Let's jump right in today because we are unpacking a truly epic historical account drawn directly from our source material. We're looking at a narrative of just unimaginable scale, unwavering perseverance, and a cataclysmic global event that literally reshaped the world as we know it. This is the story of Prophet Noah, also known as Nuh in the Arabic tradition. We're going to be exploring his incredible 950-year mission, the construction of an absolutely impossible vessel, and the terrifying reality of the Great Flood. So let's get into it. We're starting our journey roughly 1,000 years after the passing of Prophet Adam. And the source points out this incredibly fascinating psychological shift that happened in society back then. You see, Satan didn't just introduce idol worship overnight. That wouldn't have worked. Instead, he tricked humanity through a very slow, generational descent. Initially, he just convinced people to build statues as a way to remember and honor pious, good people who had passed away. It seemed totally innocent, right? But over generations, that original intent got lost, and people slowly began worshiping these statues as literal idols. The worship of one god was just entirely abandoned. And this brings us to a number that is just staggering: 950. To combat this widespread idolatry, God sent Prophet Noah. Now, the source material notes that humans lived significantly longer lifespans back then, but still, just try to imagine dedicating yourself to the exact same incredibly difficult job day in and day out for nearly a millennium. For 950 years, Noah preached to a society that continuously mocked, rejected, and harassed him. The sheer mental and spiritual fortitude required to keep a mission going for 9.5 centuries is honestly almost impossible for us to wrap our modern minds around. So, what was the absolute core of this massive mission? As the text from Surah Nuh highlights, warn your people before there comes to them a painful punishment. Noah was just tireless. He didn't just preach from a safe distance, The text tells us he literally went directly to their homes. He spoke to them privately, one-on-one, and he addressed them publicly in large gatherings. Grinding day and night, he offered them forgiveness and blessings if they would just abandon their idols. But year after year, decade after decade, century after century, they just demanded he bring on this punishment he kept warning them about. But then we hit this definitive and honestly heartbreaking turning point. A divine revelation comes down to Noah with a really harsh reality. No one else will believe. Aside from the tiny handful of people who had already accepted his message, the window for salvation for this specific society was permanently closed. God told Noah not to grieve for them anymore. Heartbroken and having exhausted literally every possible effort over 950 years, Noah finally prayed for the earth to be entirely cleared of the disbelievers so that no one would be left to mislead future generations. Which brings us to our next section, constructing the massive ark. The divine response to Noah's prayer wasn't some immediate lightning strike. It was a command to build. And this process was far from simple. Noah couldn't just run down to the local lumberyard to buy supplies. He lived on a barren mountain, no trees, no nearby water. So step 1, he had to plant the trees himself. Step 2, he had to wait years patiently for this timber to grow to the right size. Step 3, harvest all that wood entirely by hand. And step 4, actually construct this massive vessel under the direct, step-by-step guidance of the angel Gabriel. All the while, his people are walking by, laughing at him, calling him an absolute madman for building a massive ship on top of a dry mountain. So who actually gets to board this colossal ship? Well, it was a very exclusive passenger list. You've got Prophet Noah himself, the very few believers who had actually listened over those 950 years, most of Noah's family, and pairs, male and female, of all the animals on Earth to ensure the continuation of the species. The source also notes a super critical design feature here. The ark was completely enclosed from the top, just as it was from the bottom. This was specifically designed to protect the passengers from the devastating torrential rain that was about to unleash. And fall it did. The sky darkens, the earth trembles. And that takes us to our next section, the Great Flood and the fate of the sun. The source describes a literally apocalyptic scene. Waves higher than the mountains themselves swallowed the earth. The water didn't just rain down from the clouds. God commanded the earth to split open. So you have oceans of water unleashing from below, while the skies are just pouring relentlessly from above. Every single living thing left outside the ark, every human, every animal, every bird, was completely engulfed and destroyed in this catastrophic global flood. And right in the middle of this chaos, two heavily contrasting mindsets collide, creating the intense emotional climax of this entire account. Despite being a mighty prophet, Noah's own son, Canaan, was a disbeliever. As the waters are rapidly rising, Noah desperately calls out to his son to board the ship. But Canaan, totally relying on worldly logic, shouts back, "I will take refuge on a mountain that will save me from the water." Noah, knowing the terrifying divine reality of what's happening, replies, "Today there is no protector from Allah's decree except for whom he shows mercy." And right as they were speaking, a massive wave crashes between him, and his son is swallowed by the flood. This brings us to a very harsh but profound truth presented in the text. Faith supersedes bloodline. Noah, in his immense grief as a father, calls out to God saying that God had promised to save his family, but the divine response was firm and absolute. Canaan was not considered part of Noah's family because his conduct was unrighteous. He was a disbeliever. Blood ties essentially mean nothing without shared faith. Realizing he had questioned the divine decree, Noah immediately sought forgiveness and repented. Eventually, a profound silence falls over a submerged earth. The storm passes. This brings us to our final section, rebirth and the Ark's legacy. Let's trace this timeline of rebirth. For 6 solid months, this massive, enclosed ark is just drifting on these violent, world-covering floodwaters high above everything that once existed. Then, exactly 6 months later, the storm completely stops. Immediately after, by divine command, the earth is ordered to swallow the water and the land finally dries up. The ark safely comes to rest on a mountain, and the passengers are commanded to disembark with peace and blessings upon them and upon all the generations that would follow. 350, because the story doesn't just end when they step off the boat. Noah lived for another 350 years after the flood subsided. He spent the remainder of his incredibly long life witnessing the rebirth of humanity, the repopulation of the animal kingdom, and the cementing of his ultimate legacy. Which leads us to a massive, lingering question. We've talked about a 950-year mission, a century of building a ship by hand, and a flood that literally wiped the earth clean. So what physical evidence remains of this epic mission today? Like, can we actually point to something real? Well, our source concludes with a really powerful assertion. The Ark is in Turkey. The text notes that researchers have located the remains of this magnificent vessel in modern-day Turkey, standing as a physical sign preserved through millennia. While people might debate ancient historical stories, physical evidence demands our attention. It leaves us with this profound sense of continuity, that the artifacts of a 950-year mission of endurance, a colossal leap of faith, and a world-ending flood might still be resting quietly on a mountain today, waiting for us to truly understand the lessons they hold. It really makes you wonder, what other ancient narratives might have physical evidence hiding in plain sight, just waiting for us to uncover them?